Don't you see we handling grown folks' business?
This one's for the grown and sexy. Grown and sexy.
I love it.
I love it.
You already know.
By Straight No Chaser Talk Radio.
Well, I like the sound of that.
Good afternoon, and we like the sound of that. It's the Chief, and good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Straight No Chaser, the show that's unfiltered, uncut, and unapologetic, where we never dilute the issues, we only serve the hard stuff. Well, before we go any further, of course, we have to introduce the maestro, Dr. T.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Good to be back.
So what's going on, Doc? How you doing this afternoon?
Just they need to put pools in schools. It's hot out here.
Oh, absolutely. It's a hot thing out here, man. You know, it just gets like that sometimes. It's like 600 degrees outside. So, you know, I'm sure folks are really doing some crazy things out here. Well, tonight, you know, we're talking about a very serious subject, and that's answering the call, the grind behind the badge. As you know, every year, thousands of individuals attempt to become police officers and sheriffs and troopers and FBI agents and DEA agents and all kinds of things in the profession. And I think they're answering the call, but sometimes they're not successful at answering the call for a variety of reasons. And we're particularly going to talk about the whole background process and what that looks like and what it takes to become a police officer. And we're just so honored today to have two veterans. Both of these gentlemen I had the privilege of working with back in the DMV. And first is retired Assistant Chief Craig Howard. Glad to have him on board.
Glad to be here, Mike. Good to be here with you guys today.
We really appreciate having you here, sir. And then the second person we have here is retired Sergeant Charles Yarborough from the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. And yeah, that's right. The studio audience loves you guys, as you can tell.
Yeah, the people love it. They love both of them.
Look like they're on the feet, man. Wow, that's what I'm seeing. My goodness. Look like they love you guys.
Stand. You got to stand.
They're on their feet, man.
I never got to grab this many around of applause. It's a pleasure being here with y'all, and we want to thank you for inviting us. We're looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, both of these gentlemen are part of a podcast that they have, and it's called Policing from a Black Perspective. And, you know, with the combined years of experience, you're talking about close to 100 years of experience between the two of them. Both of these gentlemen have seen a lot in their law enforcement careers. Of course, Sergeant Yarborough, man, this joker, man, when I was in the training division, we went to visit him in Metropolitan Police Department training division, man. This dude was doing stuff to just make you sweat just watching him, man. The dude was walking up a hill with a car on his back. You know what I mean?
You talking about one of those Hot Wheels?
This man was just a legend. And then, of course, Assistant Chief Howard, man, this guy was just really instrumental, particularly in the area of community policing and building community relations. You know, I mean, he did some phenomenal things, especially when he was down in the Clinton area of Prince George's County. And then when he rose through the ranks to become an assistant chief, you know, he maintained that mandate of making sure that it was community first in terms of ensuring that officers remembered who we work for and those types of things. So, you know, just really two incredible gentlemen that we have with us tonight. And then, gentlemen, you know, Dr. T, you know, this guy is just doing some phenomenal things. Dr. T, not only is he a principal at a school now for very talented young people called ATEC out here in Las Vegas, but he was also a principal at a school that specialized in dealing with young people that had behavioral challenges. And I'm sure he'll talk about that later on, but he did some phenomenal things with those young people. And he also did some things that sort of help young people keep their background straight. So, it's just great that we have him on to add that perspective as well. But gentlemen, as we look at, answering the call for service, and, we have thousands of folks who come from minority communities that want to be police officers and FBI agents and troopers and so forth. But for a variety of reasons, these young folks are not able to make it, whether it's they can't pass the background, they can't pass the written test, and a host of other things. And so, with that in mind, I'd just like to know from you, Sarge, and from you, Chief, what are some of the things that you've seen over your careers, and how do you think we can start making some inroads into some of these concerns?
Charles, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the most important things about that is the preparation, getting them to understand what they're getting ready to walk into. So that means their background as far as their learning skills, their ability to understand that law enforcement is a 24/7, it's not a 9-to-5 job. And I think that getting them and bringing officers in like ourselves that have the experience and talking to them about preparation and getting to know that in order to prepare yourself, you got to be mentally prepared as well as physically prepared to take on the challenges of what is required out of you. There's different requirements for the federal entities as well as the local entities, and getting as much information about what you're getting ready to get into, knowing a little bit about the department, what are some of the requirements the department has, and then preparing yourself for those and reaching out to some of the officers and members that are already been on the department or have some experience such as ourselves.
Absolutely.
And just to follow up on some of the points that Charles just brought out, which I totally agree with, I think a lot of young people, especially in the communities of Latino and African American community, they don't really look at law enforcement as a possible job or a career for a lot of them. There have been so many bad perceptions of what law enforcement is in minority communities that's one of the, I would say, downsides to trying to get young people to come into policing. And the truth of the matter is, we need any good police department to serve and looks like and look the community they serve. So I think the police departments around the United States have a lot of work to do to attract and retain qualified young people to come on the police forces. And while they're doing that, they're going to have to maintain high standards and make sure that they stick to the mandate that they have set forth to hire these people.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and let's talk a little bit about that. When you look at the background process, what does the background process? Let's talk about that, and then we can kind of move into some of these other challenges that some of the young people are facing.
I think as far as the background is concerned, that's one of the things that we didn't necessarily have to worry about because we didn't have social media as a part of that process. So now a lot of these young folks don't understand when they put stuff out on social media and the departments look into those things, some of those things that they put out, they may think it's funny or that it's no big deal. But now the agencies are looking at it and say, no, you can't come on board, or they may have some tattoos, or even when I came on the department, you had to have your hair a certain style. It was low cut, quite naturally like military. And if you think about it, all throughout all 50 states, you don't see state troopers with dreads. If you go into the military, you got to get your hair cut. So a lot of those things now are taboo for some of the young folks. Matter of fact, I was doing some training with a group, and a young man had his dreads and so forth, and he had opportunity to go in the police department, but he refused to cut his dreads off because he thought that was not necessary for him to be a police officer. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And again, based on what Craig was saying, I agree with him, is that the more research you do about the agency, especially if it's a federal government or a state troop or whatever, there's certain requirements that go along with that. And the more that you know about those requirements and get those understandings and bringing people on board that have that knowledge and see whether or not that is going to be a good fit for you, so you know what you're walking into, I think we'll do a lot better. And Craig made a very good point. The agencies have to get out and do a little bit more than recruiting and just, selling them a pie in the sky or signing up for a bonus of $25,000 or $15,000 to join the agency, and then come to find out these people wind up moving or going to another agency or not even staying on the department probably less than 3 or 4 years.
And you know, that's a great point. You know, when you're looking at some of the things that are required in the background process, particularly when it comes to the folks that you hang out with. You know, I'm sure we can all think of those situations and folks that we shouldn't have been around, and we all are guilty of it at one point in our lives. But I think that's one of the things that we have not necessarily passed along to some of our young people, and that is you have to be careful of the company you keep, because as you know, these background processes are extremely thorough. They want to know things you did in elementary school, and you may be 21, 22, 28 years old, and you're trying to reach back to when you were at school 58 in Baltimore. You know what I mean? So, all these things do come back to you. But, I'd also like Dr. T to kind of talk about, he had a program at his school called Pathways to Public Safety, and that sort of looked at some of these issues. Doc, you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that they brought up social media because as a high school principal, we talk to our kids that want to, their trajectory is to go to the Ivy League schools and the top tier schools in our country, because they are able to do the coursework and be very successful. But one of the things that we tell them is, hey, your social media, we've known of students, several students throughout our country that have lost scholarships because of affiliation. So, I tell them, hey, if you put my name in a Google search, because I have a particular interesting name, last name, and you find my social media, it's all about my kids and what they're doing. There's nothing really negative or negative at all regarding my social media. So I'm glad that was brought up, because people do look, they do their research. Also, with the public safety curriculum, and I'm gonna give credit to you, the chief, do the salute. You came up to me with the idea, and we both collectively put it together. And a lot of the resources came from the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, and that was very interesting, because if you go to that website, we wanted to make it easier for kids. So we talked about several things, to be a firefighter, coroner, EMT, a lawyer, and just things that you can do within your city or county to serve, a police officer, and that was very important. One of the things that I liked about that website, and what we did was we just grabbed some information. The kids had to do some work on okay, we're talking about police officer. What do you need to do? And, the requirements. How our young kids say, hey, I want to live in Hawaii. Okay, this is, if you press Hawaii, this is how much a police officer makes, which is great, but you have to understand the cost of living. And one thing that is close to my heart, I'm a veteran. So if you wanted to be an MP or shore patrolman or shore patrol person, it shows what the requirements are to be involved in any branch of military service, which I thought that was very interesting. The chief, what he did is he contacted his resources, and since we started the program during our virtual education experience that we had, because it was during COVID, it was very easy to have police officers, fire men. I think we had a policewoman as well, to do a virtual, and our kids got the opportunity to see them virtually, and they had the opportunity to ask questions as well. And I think that's very important. And as stated before, it is very important to, in all of our areas in public service and public safety, is to see somebody that looks like us and kind of be that mentor for our kids. And we were even talking about looking at the curriculum regarding, especially the English portion, about, okay, this is what you need to do to pass the test. Okay, how can we look at the curriculum as it relates to passing the test? Because I'm sure that was a barrier for some kids. The physical attributes, they're posted on the website, and that's really easy. Our PE teachers, hey, because we now have just more than just PE classes. We have weight training, CrossFit, and all these other great opportunities for our kids to stay in shape. But it opened some students' eyes. It made sure that, okay, you're in middle school. What you do in middle school is reflecting of what happens to you as an adult. So if you like to be involved in antisocial behavior, stealing, smoking, and all that stuff that some of our kids do, that's going to come back to haunt you. You got to be very careful of, like you said before, be very careful of who you align with. And we talked about that as well, to make sure that, hey, if you want to be that police officer or you want to be an MP in the Army, this is what you do.
Thanks. And I think we got the Chief Howard. You back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I think we got you now. So we definitely want to hear your perspective on this.
One of the things that I think is pretty important is I don't think a lot of young people that are considering the possibility of going into law enforcement, they don't understand the things as they're going to apply to go into law enforcement, whether that's federal, state, or local. What the agencies are looking at as possible disqualifiers. And I'm going to throw a few of those out. Your credit score, and whether you pay your bills. That's one of the things that get young people disqualified. Drug use. Drug use is a problem that a lot of people have that's trying to come into law enforcement. Your criminal history. And when I say criminal history, that could be, if you got a traffic ticket. I don't think a traffic ticket should be a disqualifier for you to be a police officer, especially if it's a minor traffic infraction. And then your social affiliations on who do you hang out with and who you associate with. And those are some of the things that are looked at very closely when young people come into policing.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that that's really interesting is, some of the soft issues, the credit, the written test. And that's one of the things that I saw quite a bit in Prince George's County, and when I was interim chief out here in Henderson, was that you had quite a number of folks that couldn't pass the written test. And, and how do we address that, Doc? You know what I mean? Because that's like the gate right there. If you can't get that past that part, you've pretty much written yourself off.
I think it's very important. Parents and students need to be active in reviewing their English grades. And, sometimes parents ask me, hey, what should my child do during the summer? And we had a couple weeks ago, we talked about this in one of our segments. Hey, read something. I know when we were kids, we'd have to read some books during the summer. And nowadays, we would want to read a comic book or something that's funny. We want to read something in the sports section when they had papers, when the papers come to the house. But, we were told, since we're old, we were told, hey, you can't read that. You have to read nonfiction literature. And that's very, very important. And nowadays, we just want kids to read something besides social media. If you want to read a comic book, read it. And it's just like anything else. To get better at something, you have to constantly practice. Sometimes it's not fun to read the paper or write. A lot of our kids nowadays, when they text, they have text language. And I'm like, okay, what do these abbreviations stand for? I don't know, you know. So they have to understand, and we talk to our kids, you can keep that, but you have to understand academic language, academic writing as well. So looking at that, having a tutor at school or even an online tutor, Khan Academy on YouTube, other programs will help. They just have to practice, do it over and over and over.
Yeah, and those are great points. You know, just getting past that part of the background process, and you know, one of the other things, and Chief kind of touched on it, and that revolved around the credit situation. And in your experience, Chief and Sarge, what kind of recommendations did you give to young people to sort of guide them through that process, you know, with the credit, or those young people that came to you and said, hey, Sarge, or hey, Chief, you know, they told me I had to get my credit together. Am I out of the process? What did you tell those young people?
Charles, you want to go, or I can go for it? Go ahead. Well, one of the things I did was when a young person came through the recruiting process, and they were held up because of their credit score, we would tell them, look, you're not totally eliminated from the process, but we need you to go and show that you can do at least 3 to 6 months of being able to pay your bills consistently, you know what I mean, and show that you won't be a liability to yourself and to the police department. And that's, you know, that's very important. If you got a person that won't pay their bills, trying to get on the police force, that may lead to them being a person that gets out there on the street and may take something that doesn't belong to them, and you know, you can't take that chance. So paying your bills shows maturity, and it also shows that you're a reliable person and you can be depended on to take care of the things that matter in your life, you know. So those are the things that I would try to impress upon a young person that is trying to come into law enforcement. And
to that point, what can the parents do in terms of helping their young people to prepare for these careers? You know, whether it's the fire department, state troopers, DEA, local police. What role do the parents have in saying, "Hey, Junior or Jane, you know, this is what you need to do if you want to look down the road at some of these type of positions"?
I think one of the things they can do is introduce them to people in the particular field that they want to go into, not just law enforcement, whether it's sciences, one of the sciences, or, you know, a lawyer or something else. You know, let them shadow that person to see if that's really what they want to do. In law enforcement, one of the things that a young person can do is come through the ride-along programs. Most police departments around the country allow a young person to come out and ride with a parental consent, ride with a police officer at least 3 times during a calendar year. That will give them an idea if that's something that they would want to do. That I think is very helpful. We also have citizen police academies. If you got a person over 21 years old that may be considering coming into law enforcement, have them come to the Citizens Police Academy to give them an idea of some of the things that they're going to be going through on the police department and some of the classes that they'll be taking and things like that, because the citizens take some of the similar classes that a police recruit will. Charles, you want to add something to that?
You're muted, Sarge. There you go.
There you go. I'm sorry. So absolutely, and I agree with what Craig was saying. One of the other things is that the family dynamics, the mom and dad, how they go along paying their bills and making sure that things are on the even keel, and teaching their children about money management and not having a whole lot of credit cards and things of that nature, or beyond their means of income and output. You know, if they have a certain amount of income coming in, but their output is on a lot of other things they really don't need. And I used to tell my daughter, there's a difference between needs and wants. What you need and what you want is 2 different things. So being prepared on that financial aspect is a very good part of being able to be recruited into law enforcement. And I think a lot of that is just based on understanding how money works to some degree and then also being able to put yourself in a position where you're looking at your credit score, and like Craig was saying, your ability to not be put in a position where you're either taking something that you're not, or being bribed as a law enforcement officer, and that's something that's very, very important. And those are some of the things that recruiting is looking at as well.
And Sarge, when you talk about the background piece, we can't overlook the physical fitness part. And what type of recommendations do you make to folks? Because I mean, you put it on them in the academy. So, what do you recommend to young folks that want to try to make it in, number one, into the academy, but also to prepare for the background physical and physical agility stuff?
I think that 2 points with that. One, there's the mental part of it, and there's the physical part of it. And you have to know what your boundaries are, and getting some information from the department in regards to what type of physical test there is, and then preparing yourself for that mentally as well as physically. And the things that I would encourage the new officers to do is before they even attempted to go to trial for the department, is see what your standards are and improve yourself by eating right, getting into physical conditioning. One of the things that we encourage them is that understanding that the biggest muscle in the body is the human heart, so cardiovascular condition is important. My background being on the SWAT team, we would have trials for the SWAT, and one of the most important parts of the trials was being able to climb a rope. And some of the guys couldn't get up the rope, and then I would ask them, how often have you been out here to the Oak Course? And my point being is that one of the things that I would suggest to them and try to get them to understand is that I would be sleeping out here. If you want it bad enough, you got to work for it, and nothing is given to you. So you have to be committed mentally as well as physically to say, hey, nothing's going to stop me. One of the things I would tell them is that if the requirement is 25 push-ups, you want to be able to do 30 and 40, because everybody has a bad day. But your bad day may be 25, and that'll get you over. But if it's a bad day and you can only do 25 and you wind up doing 20, then you fail. So the mental part of it, I think, is just more important as the physical part of it.
And can I add something to what Sergeant Yarborough just said, Mike? One of the problems that I've seen, I would go watch the new recruits go through the physical fitness training to come on the police force. And I guess this can go over to Dr. T and he can chime in on this. One of the things that I saw that hurt a lot of these kids, when we were in high school and junior high school, physical education was a requirement. We had to take physical education every year. You had to get a gym suit. You had to participate to get a grade to pass. Now in a lot of school systems around the United States, physical education is an elective. And a lot of these young people are coming out of high school, they can't run a mile and a half, they can't do 20 push-ups, unless they were playing a sport that kept them in shape. But it was amazing to me to see 21-year-olds and 22, 23-year-olds that couldn't run a mile and a half, 6 times around a track in less than 12 to 15 minutes. And physical fitness should be a part of your life, and I don't know. I think our education system is hurting these young people by taking physical fitness out of the schools. And, as a police officer, if you're not shape, you might lose your life just by not being able to get out of the way or something. So that was one of the things I saw. And when I found out that physical education was not a requirement in public schools anymore, that was kind of disheartening to me.
Well, let me add, you're right. Within our district, it's required. We have PE1, PE2. But I think with us, when we were kids, for us to get an A to run a mile, we had to have a certain time to run a mile, right? Nowadays, it's just, hey, at least you're out there, you can get your A, right? Plus, we have the online option where you can take PE online and get the PE credit as well.
How do you take PE online?
Well, what they do is, for example, baseball. Baseball is my sport, right? So, all right, so we're going to learn the fundamentals of baseball, what the rules are, and then at the end, you read about it, and then you have a test. You know, hey, you have a runner on first and second, and the batter hits a home run. How many runs they've scored? You know, that's a part of the online version of PT. But you know, it's again, I think we're going. You hit the nail on the head, but I think we're going into a place where, you know, where the parents are different, our society is different. You know, how dare you tell my kid to run a mile? You know, and as a principal, all right, we have bigger fish to fry, right? And they don't understand that. Now, when we were kids, I remember eating horribly. I would eat, you know, the Hostess donuts, the cupcakes, and I still can participate because I played baseball. I was active. But now we have so much of juvenile diabetes and overweight kids and things like that. With our district, the Department of Agriculture had to step in and said, hey, 30 minutes before school and 30 minutes after school, you cannot have any junk, anything. You can't sell donuts. You can't sell Cane's, which is our chicken place that the kids love. You can't do any fundraising during lunch selling lollipops. And as a reward, you can't even give out candy or chocolate. So we're at this point where, you know, the Department of Agriculture just stepped in and said, hey, we had enough with our kids not being in shape. But again, you know, once you have a good parent support system, then like you said, hey, you know, like, you know, my mom said, hey, go outside and play. You could go. But these are not the parents nowadays because they, especially with the video games and the online learning, they're just sitting most of the day.
I don't know about y'all, Mike, but around my neighborhood, growing up in Atlanta, we played outside in the summer till the street lights came on. You had to be home when the street lights came on.
Yep. And the great thing, we checked in, right? You checked in, and then, hey, Mom, can we go out? And then we went back out because we played baseball all day. Even when it was hot, humid, we just played because we love the game. So we go back out at night and play hide go seek, right? And that was until about 10 o'clock because I remember that time I had to be home 9 or 10 o'clock, especially as a kid. But we were constantly moving, constantly active.
I think Craig made a good point, and that is a real funny story real quick. So my grandson, in that participation, when I was growing up, when all of us, it was first place, second place, and third place, and that was it. You didn't get a participation trophy just for showing up. So I went to my grandson's track meet, and he was running, he did pretty good. He came in 8th place. Do you know that the family wanted to stay there for 8th place? I got out of my seat. It was hot. I went into the air conditioning, and I waited. 8th place? I'm not sitting around for 8th place. No.
So no, so much. No, I disagree with that, Sarge, because on my badminton team, I got a trophy for most improved.
Oh man, we gotta stop. And I agree with Dr. T and Craig is saying. I mean, I think that's one of the downfalls that we have in today's society, especially, and Dr. T made a good point. When you have parents that are not active, they don't believe in that. Why my son got to do this? I've had people come and Craig made a good point. They'll come to what we call the PHE. So they would get out of a police car, unbuckle their seatbelt, run into the gym, up and down a flight of stairs, down a flight of stairs, drag a dummy, go over a fence, and then they had to identify a suspect. I was in there one day, and I swear to you, all three, this guy was 6'6", and he could not get over the fence.
6'6".
You heard what I said, 6'6", and he could not get over the fence. And this is what he did. We standing there watching. So he had the nerve to say, look up here, and ran around the fence. Like, man, just go out. But then we had a guy that was 71 years old. He came and did the PAT in street shoes.
Wow.
71 years old. So it had nothing to do with your age. It has to do with your mental ability and your physical
right.
attributes,
That's
and a
right.
willingness to want to. And I think that Craig made a very good point. If you look at the schools now, and like Chief said, the participation, no. All right, it's first place, second place, and third place. Anything after that, go sit in the sideline.
Yep.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Well, let me ask this question. I know this is the 900-pound gorilla in the room. Is there disparity in the amount or the type of folks that are making it through the background processes that you've seen? Are you're muted?
Jake, I think
Go
you
ahead.
moved.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
I was just reading an article that the International Association of Chiefs of Police put out at the end of 2024, and they were saying, according to their survey of about 1,300 police departments, over 70% reported that recruitment had become more difficult compared to the previous 5 years. And on average, agencies are currently operating at about 91% of what their total staffing should be, and that indicating that 10% that they're missing, that deficit that they're missing is happening across the board in the United States with law enforcement. And I think agencies might, are lowering their recruiting standards. They're loosening restrictions on things like tattoos and facial hair. They're like Charles mentioned earlier, they're increasing, salaries and hiring bonuses. And what they're trying to do is streamline the hiring process and make it, a little quicker and easier for these people. And I hope that with them doing this, because of the shortage of young people coming into law enforcement, that you're not bringing a batch of bad apples in, you know what I mean? Because they've not been scrutinized as much as we were, trying to get on, you know what I mean? But that's a problem that's happening all across the country with police departments. So, I don't know, Mike, can you repeat that question again? Maybe I missed it, but could you repeat it again?
Yeah, sure. My question was, is there data out there that talks about who is getting through the portal, particularly when we're looking at the written tests, the backgrounds, you know what I mean? Is it, are females having the most difficulty? Is it, males, certain economic categories? You know what I mean? Are we seeing issues just from that perspective?
No, I think that one of the things with that is, depending on what agency you go to, and Dr. T mentioned and Craig mentioned, is that if you go into a federal entity, their standards are a lot higher on the financial aspect and on the academic standpoint, as well as local law enforcement agencies. They may lower their standards a little bit. But nonetheless, the bottom line about it is there is definitely a disparity within the cultural background in reference to people of color. And if you sit back and think about it, how well are recruiting being done at HBCUs and organizations like that, who are actually going in and trying to, I guess, for lack of better words, sell law enforcement to these young folks now. And that's not something that they may look at as a career. But again, and I think Dr. T mentioned it, if your police department is a reflection, and Craig mentioned this too, of the people that live in the neighborhood, you'll get better service, you'll get more cooperation from the community and from law enforcement both. So those are some of the things that I think are imperative and important for law enforcement agencies as well as the community to come together and have some understanding about how important it is.
I saw a recruiting video from a large department out of the state of North Carolina recently, I think within the last week or two. And what caught my attention was, and I think, Mike, we talked about this, everyone on the recruiting video was white. And I think that was out of Northern Virginia, that department out of Northern Virginia. And that kind of, caught my attention that, you were excluding a group of people. And I think when you're putting out information to recruit people the same way when you look at the United States Marine Corps, the Army, or whatever, you want to have somebody look like everybody on the United States up there. You know what I mean? And that is a turnoff to a lot of people when you're trying to recruit people to your department, and the only faces you see on your recruiting videos are white people. One of the interesting statistics I found, Mike, as we were talking about this whole recruiting and retention, was that there are regional trends that are coming up, and they say that on the regional trends, that recruitment difficulties are more severe in the Midwest and the Northeast, while agencies in the South and the West are reported slightly less difficulty in recruiting, and that I found that to be interesting. And why is that? So it depends on where you are and what your department is on how they're reaching out and recruiting into their communities.
Sure. Now, do you think that has to do with who's living in these communities, or what do you think, just in your humble opinion, is creating that trend?
I think it's a lot of that. The community that you live in, out in the Midwest, when you meet officers from the Midwest, I know that they have a lot of Black and Hispanic officers out there in places like Missouri and St. Louis or whatever, but I think that has a big part of it. When you look around on some of these state police and police departments and you don't see anybody look like you, then I think it gives the young people that want to come into policing, it gives them a feeling of, well, they really don't want me on that department, and they just don't apply.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. I think the other thing that people don't realize is that 85% of law enforcement in the United States are white males, and that's just reality. Especially even more so on the federal side when you talk about DEA, ATF, the FBI, and things of that nature. So Craig's making a very good point. So if you want to look at bringing me on board as an entity in the agency, you got to have some people that are of color and some people, even females, and bringing those people in as part of your recruitment. And hopefully you may get one or two that may join the agency and never know what their high level may be. They may wind up being a chief or a commander, whatever the case may be. But if I don't see that, it's very difficult for me to go somewhere where I don't see people that look like me and want to be brought into their fold.
And as a community, whether you're talking about the African American community, Hispanic community, the gay community, what types of things do you think those community members can do to encourage their young people to apply? And then once they do apply and they're successful with the academy process, to encourage them to continue with that career path? Because I think there are 3 jump-off points when you're looking at law enforcement where you can lose people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, from the statistics I've looked at recently, Mike, they say most young police officers leave within the first 5 years. I think somebody mentioned it a little earlier, maybe 3 years, but they're saying on average 5 years. Some of the things they could do is, to me, is improve the hours that the officers work. I know a lot of departments out there now are going to these 12-hour shifts, and that can be kind of hard on you, as far as if you've got a family or whatever, that can be taxing on you. That can drain you. Increase the pay for these officers. One of the big things I think they need, after you've been out there for a couple of years and saw a lot of things, is allowing you to get mental health help if you need it. From just being burnt out or being out there seeing one day you're on a homicide scene, the next day you're on a car crash, or tonight I'm on a domestic that's kind of violent. A lot of these young officers can get burnt out because they don't even realize it. They're suffering from post-traumatic stress. You know what I mean? So, I think that's very important to help with a young person, to be able to stay in their career. And I think the most important thing that I've seen over the years is, with the cost of living in some of these places these officers would like to live, a lot of them cannot afford to live where they work because the cost of living has gotten so expensive, that they can't live in the communities they serve. So that economics plays a big part too, into these young people wanting to come into police force or policing altogether.
Absolutely.
Craig makes some very good points. One of the things that I was thinking about, and I talked to Craig about this, was it's called face to face. So what you do is you get people from the community to come to the police academy, and you bring in these young police officers, and you hold up some cards and say there's 3 things you can't talk about: sex, politics, or religion. So let's say we're talking about sports, or we're talking about cooking, whatever. So once you hold a card up, you have those groups now, the young police officers and the citizens, they get at the table, and that's what they're going to talk about and discuss. Then you take those same citizens and use them as role players in scenario-based training. So now once the recruit graduates out of the academy and he's out on patrol, he's walking the street, hey, Mr. Johnson, hey, Officer so-and-so, how you doing? Now they have a relationship with each other. It ain't the first time that they've met. And this can be very helpful to establish that relationship between law enforcement and the police department and the community. And if you sit back and think about it, with the fact that most of the police officers in these areas are not or have been around people of color. So now they're in a black neighborhood and they're policing. So now they have understanding about the cultural differences and how we relate to each other, talk to each other. And I think that face-to-face program could be something that could be introduced to a lot of law enforcement agencies, and I think it'd be very helpful.
I agree with that. I think, sometimes there's a misperception that having these types of opportunities is seen as, I don't know, as weak policing or something along those lines. I don't even know how to categorize it, but it's been my experience that the more opportunities you have for dialogue between, law enforcement and whatever community it is, it only gets better. You know what I mean? With time, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think maybe that's part of the problem. People think that, when we met with this community, with a community, and it's Tuesday morning and we did it Monday night, I don't understand why things haven't improved yet. There's just a process to get people to trust you. And so I think that I agree with you, sir. I think the more opportunities there are for that type of interaction, everyone wins. And it's unfortunate that some people don't see it that way.
Mike, I will always be a proponent of community policing. You did community policing in your career. I did community policing. Charles, we did it. The police has to be a part of the community. We are a part of the community, and police departments can't step away from that. And one of the things I want to bring out on this recruiting piece, with this whole push with the administration that's in the White House right now on getting away with diversity, equity, and inclusion, I hope that doesn't bleed into nullifying a lot of young people that want to come into law enforcement, that some of these local and state police departments are using that diversity and inclusion as a crutch to not bring young people into policing, because I guarantee you something is going to happen in that community that's diverse from the majority of that police department, and they're going to need somebody in there that can talk the language of that community.
Oh, absolutely. And I've said it publicly, and every agency I've been a part of, you cannot be a successful police department without the support of the community. I don't give a damn what kind of technology you have. We got nuclear powered drones. We can look through walls. We can do all kinds of things. If you don't have the basic support of the community, number one, I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact that the community is the one that's writing the checks. You know what I mean? All the sexy toys that you have, the raises that you have, all that stuff, the community is footing that bill. You know what I mean? I think sometimes people forget that. Number two, when we've all been through riot training, and one of the things in Riot 101 is to find somebody, if you can, find that individual in the community or in that situation that may be that voice of reason, that may be able to tell people, okay, y'all, look, here's what we're going to do. They're going to let us do this as long as we don't tear the place up. You know what I mean? Or when you have horrible homicides or rapes or robberies, and then you put those bolos out on your social media and other things, asking the community's assistance. You know what I mean? Even when you put up a $9 million reward. But the community doesn't think that, there is a reciprocation of respect. you know, they're pretty much going to thumb your nose up. All you have to do is look at what happened in Baltimore for a couple of years. You know, their case solving rate was down in the 20-30 percentile range. And that was right after the whole Freddie Gray thing, because the community was like, we're not telling you crap. You're treating us like shit, and we're not talking to you. Now, people may not want to have that hard conversation, but at the end of the day, we all know, Sarge and Chief and Doc, you know, the formal data can tell you one thing. Formal data can say on Mike Blow Street, they're all zeros across the board. But when you go down on the street, as our FTOs taught us, when the streets are talking and the folks on the street are saying the reason you're showing zeros is because nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody wants to report a crime because they don't want the police coming in here, because they think either they're going to be treated like crap or nothing's going to happen, or they're afraid, you know? So we have to get back to that part of being able to talk to folks, including people from all communities in our ranks. You know what I mean? Whether you're black, white, Hispanic, straight, gay, it doesn't matter. If you have the background, the ability, and the ethics, the ethical compass to serve, it shouldn't matter where you come from. You know what I mean? You should be given. So I'm hoping, Craig, that this, like you said, this whole DEI doesn't, you know, get down in the weeds and start making agencies saying, well, we don't have to hire any more women. We don't have to hire any more Hispanic folk. We don't have to, you know what I mean? Should be, we want the best people from all segments of our community to help us take it to another level. That's just my opinion.
That's real talk, Mike. That's real talk.
So, well, guys, again, you know, we really appreciate you just kind of helping us. We didn't even scratch the surface, I know, with the little bit of time we have, but we certainly look forward to you all coming back. I know we had talked to Sarge and the Chief. They're going to come back and join us for some other topics, because this is just the beginning of many topics in law enforcement that we need to talk about. But we figured we'd start here, because if you can't get through the door to serve, you know, all the other things that we're going to talk about are kind of moot. If you can't, you know, if you can't be a part of that process. So we just appreciate you all taking the time to hang out with us this afternoon, and just look forward to some other conversations.
Well, we appreciate it, Mike. Thank you very much. And if you don't mind, I'd like to once again invite you guys and your listeners to come listen to our podcast, Policing from a Black Perspective. That's POLICING, capital FABP.com. We are found on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And Mike, I appreciate the opportunity. Charles?
Sarge, they toss it to you, Sarge.
He's muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Again, I want to concur with Craig was saying. I want to thank you, Chief and Dr. T. Y'all are very well diverse in what y'all are doing over there in Las Vegas and so forth. There's an opportunity to maybe come visit, and we look forward to y'all coming on our podcast as well. And thanks for the opportunity, Mike. We really appreciate it, and y'all be safe, and God bless.
Absolutely. Doc, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm gonna check this out. This is gonna be good, and we can continue our partnership. This is great. So yeah, we're gonna support you guys. So thank you for the invitation. So everyone, it's been another great evening. Thank you for listening to Straight No Chaser. Good night.
Turn it up. Keeping it grown and sexy. Keeping it grown and sexy. Delicious.
Keep them coming.
With Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. Keeping it grown and sexy. Keeping it grown and sexy. Delicious.
Keep them coming.
With Straight No Chaser Talk Radio.
Grown and sexy.
Turn it up. Keeping it grown and sexy. Keeping it grown and sexy. Delicious.
Keep them coming.
With Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. Keeping it grown and sexy. Keeping it grown and sexy. Delicious.
Keep them coming.
With Straight No Chaser Talk
All right, guys,
Radio.
Grown and sexy.
Turn it up. Keeping it grown and
Hey, we're
sexy.
still live.
Yeah, we're off. I just had to turn off those other things.
It says we're still live on my
Really?
end. Yeah.
Oh, okay.